We see them. In Spain, they're called the Nini. Did you hear what I said? We see them, they. Look at the degree of separation in that word, them. Are you willing to dive into this issue with me, not to judge, but to understand this concept, this issue, this problem for some of homelessness? Homelessness is a topic often overlooked, shrouded in silence and misconceptions. In the media, homeless individuals are often portrayed in extremes, either vilified or romanticized, yet the reality of their struggles remains largely unaddressed. One of the most shocking things for me was arriving in Barcelona and seeing so many homeless people. And then I saw the same in Paris and then again in the center of Milan. I hadn't expected that in first world countries and in some of the most beautiful cities in the world. That was my prejudice, I suppose. But let's talk about homelessness and the truth about it. It's a stain on humanity, a stark reminder of the glaring disparities that exist in our society. It's heartbreaking to consider that while some individuals possess numerous homes, others are forced to sleep on the streets just because they cannot afford basic shelter. Regrettably, many of us fail to grasp the harsh realities of homelessness. Like I said, there's a degree of separation. We're not even willing to look at homeless people, perhaps out of fear. But whatever it is, there persists a pervasive misconception that individuals who are homeless are somehow responsible for their circumstances, that they are lazy, that they lack ambition. However, the truth is far more complex and nuanced than such simplistic judgments. Homelessness is not always a choice. It's a complex interplay of systemic issues, economic disparities, and individual circumstances. And to truly understand the depth of this tragedy, we must confront the uncomfortable truths and challenge the prevailing narratives. To offer insight into the experiences of homelessness, I'm going to dive into some poignant quotes that shed light on the harsh realities of this crisis. In addition, I'm going to look at the factors behind this issue, this situation, this blight on society. And like I mentioned before, this stain, and it really is a stain on humanity. Have we failed them? That's the question I would like you to keep at the back of your mind. You can spend money on new housing for poor people and the homeless, or you can spend it on a football stadium or a golf course or wars that nobody wants. So, welcome to today's blogging session where we're going to dive deep. And despite being one of the most pressing social issues of our time, homelessness is often oversimplified and stigmatized. It's their fault. They're lazy. Today, I'd like to break down those stereotypes and explore the multifaceted nature of homelessness. It's not as cut and dried as we assume. 7 out of 10 Americans are one paycheck away from being homeless. I don't know if this is a fact, but what are your thoughts on it? Please join the community and comment. Now, homelessness isn't just about lacking a place to live. It's a complex issue with far-reaching implications. While obviously the most visible form of homelessness is sleeping rough on the streets, it also includes those living in shelters, couch surfing, or staying in temporary accommodations. Homelessness can be temporary, it could be chronic, and individuals experiencing homelessness may face a range of challenges, including access to healthcare, employment, and social support. Not everyone who's homeless is a drug addict or in need of mental care. Some are normal people who've been knocked down, and it can happen to you too. Not all of us made bad choices. Homelessness affects millions of people worldwide with varying degrees of severity and duration. In the United States alone, over 500,000 individuals are homeless on any given night. However, these numbers only scratch the surface of the issue, as many individuals experiencing homelessness are hidden from official statistics, living in precarious, dangerous situation, or even doubling up with family and friends. Homelessness is not just about having a job or an apartment, or not having a job or an apartment. Too often, homelessness is due to a disordered mind. What are your thoughts on that? Economic instability and rising costs are significant contributors to homelessness for many individuals and families. A sudden job loss, medical emergency, things that they have zero control over, or eviction can quickly spiral into homelessness. Additionally, stagnant wages and the lack of affordable housing options create barriers to stable housing for low income households, pushing them further into homelessness. I just like to look at these two concepts. A sudden job loss, even if you have 6 months saved for your expenses. If you don't get a job, another job within those 6 months, you may very well end up homeless. During COVID, many people lost their jobs, and no one expected the lockdown to go on for 6 months to 2 years. Everyone was ill prepared for such a thing. Can we really protect ourselves against a sudden job loss? Really think about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. What about a medical emergency? Not everyone can afford private health care. But what happens if a medical crisis strikes? In some countries, going for an operation, getting chemotherapy, it's simply unaffordable. The costs do pile up. So, are we really protected, or are we as protected as we think? Now, let's look at this and how we view and perceive homeless people compared to those who are part of our social circle. So, like you, I know people who drink, people who do drugs, and bosses who have tantrums and treat their subordinates like dirt. They all have good jobs. Were they to become homeless, some of them would surely also become alcoholics, addicts, or mentally ill. Those are the labels that we save for the homeless, for those of a certain socio-economic level. A billionaire simply does drugs. A billionaire simply likes to drink. A billionaire who is bossy and has tantrums is labeled straightforward and dynamic. But these very same people, if they were to become homeless, would then be called alcoholics, addicts, or mentally ill. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Now, one of the root causes of homelessness that I've mentioned is the lack of affordable housing. And as housing prices soar in many urban areas, low income individuals and families are increasingly pushed out of the housing market, leaving them vulnerable to homelessness. And this housing crisis is exacerbated by gentrification, urban development projects, and the prioritization of luxury housing over affordable options. This is the reality. Mental health issues, I touched on this. And without a doubt, mental health issues are prevalent among homeless populations. And this is often exacerbated by the stress and trauma of living on the streets. To be quite honest, think about it. If you were to become homeless, wouldn't you then develop mental health issues? Wouldn't you become depressed? I mean, it's a given, right? Yet, access to mental health services remains limited for many homeless individuals, perpetuating a cycle of untreated mental illness and homelessness. Additionally, the stigma surrounding mental health can prevent individuals from seeking help, further isolating them from support networks. And I had a student in a group class where we had this amazing discussion point out the fact that if you're homeless, if you're uneducated, you actually don't have any idea where to seek help. You really are in a lose lose situation. Now, let's talk about substance abuse and addiction. I'm not going to gloss over anything here. Substance abuse and addiction are also common among homeless populations, with many turning to drugs or alcohol as a coping mechanism for their challenging circumstances. They may not have been alcoholics or drug addicts before becoming homelessness. It may have been a coping mechanism that they employed. Now, it's essential to recognize that substance abuse is often a symptom rather than a cause of homelessness. We're very quick to say that's the cause, that's why they became homeless, because they're alcoholics and because they're drug addicts. No, I think it's the opposite. It's a symptom, it's a coping mechanism. Individuals may turn to drugs or alcohol as a way to numb the pain of homelessness or to cope with untreated mental health issues. Homelessness also affects marginalized communities, vets, veterans, war veterans, and those with disabilities. And this really gets my goat. This really annoys me. Men and women who have fought for their countries, veterans who are then relegated to the streets. The structural inequalities, the racism, and sometimes even homophobia exacerbate homelessness among these populations. And homelessness doesn't discriminate based on age or family status. And I often say this based on a quote that I once read: we are all 10 bad decisions away from homelessness. So I mentioned that homelessness doesn't discriminate based on age or family status. Youth and families make up a significant portion of the homeless population, facing unique challenges and barriers to accessing support and resources. They stuck in this vicious cycle. Many youth experiencing homelessness have aged out of the foster care system. So think about that. They were in foster care and then they were just thrown out into the world. Or they fled abusive households. Which one's worse? I mean, life has to be pretty awful in an abusive household for someone to choose homelessness over that. And this often leaves them without stable housing or support networks. It's a huge problem. I have no idea where to even start on the solutions, but I really do want us to think about this and to be aware and to do a little, even a tiny bit, to help. Now, addressing homelessness requires a multifaceted approach that addresses its root causes and provides comprehensive support to those experiencing homelessness. And this includes increasing access to affordable housing. Come on, governments, stop building unnecessary ego projects and build affordable housing. Expand mental health and substance abuse services, also healthcare instead of war, and implementing targeted interventions for marginalized communities. Additionally, addressing systemic inequalities and dismantling structural barriers is essential for preventing and ending homelessness. Let's catch people before they slip through the holes. While there are various approaches to addressing homelessness, there are also significant challenges in providing adequate support and resources for those in need. Okay, without a doubt, let's be honest, there are funding constraints, there are bureaucratic barriers, there are things that our governments prioritize above homelessness. There's also the societal stigma, and these all pose obstacles to effectively combating homelessness. But what really impresses me is that in a country like Finland, they have managed to pretty much eradicate homelessness. So let's look at what they are doing right, because they obviously are. And another thing is that there's the criminalization of homelessness through silly policies, punitive policies that punish, and laws. And these further marginalize and harm individuals who are already experiencing homelessness. It's like it's impossible to climb out of this situation. But despite these challenges, there are amazing people out there. There are grassroots organizations and community driven initiatives, and they play a vital role in providing support and services to homeless individuals. So if your government won't step up, well, be grateful for these grassroots organizations. They're giving someone a hot meal and sometimes even a place to stay. So, from soup kitchens and shelters to outreach programs and advocacy efforts, these movements, these grassroots movements, offer hope and assistance to those in need. And community solutions such as housing first approaches and supportive housing models prioritize providing stable housing as the first step towards addressing homelessness. One person can make a difference. Now, your current situation does not define your worth. And that's something I think that people who are trapped in this vicious cycle need to remember. But it's not easy to stay positive when you are trapped. We think sometimes that poverty is only being hungry, naked, and homeless. But the poverty of being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for is the greatest poverty of all. We must start in our own homes to remedy this kind of poverty. So, as we come to an end on this exploration of homelessness, remember that these people are not just statistics or a social issue, it's a human experience. What can we do? Well, we can challenge stereotypes, we can advocate for policy change. And if that doesn't work, how about just supporting grassroots efforts? Just $1 here or $1 there. And we can work together to end homelessness and create a more just and compassionate society for all. Because remember what I said, we are all 10 bad decisions away from being the man in the picture. I hope that this video didn't depress you. I hope that it enlightened you. I hope that it made you aware. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions about upcoming topics that you'd like me to dive deep into, please join the conversation and comment. I'm your host, NAS, and thanks for joining me today.